In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today.
Fire Facilities manufactures steel live fire training towers, customized to meet your training needs. Check us out at FDIC or learn more at firefacilities.com.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Backstep. I'm Ronnie K, the good-looking gentleman with the gray hair. We'll get to him in a minute. And Mr. Mustache down below there, my buddy Tom. Tommy, what's going on out west?
Nothing. I was actually out traveling last week. Had the pleasure of spending 6 days at the National Fire Academy. And I'm back. I'm getting caught up on my paperwork and emails, and here I am.
All right, sounds good. How's the weather out there on the west side of the town?
It has been tremendously dry, but they're predicting snow this evening, and we'll see what happens.
I remember a few weeks ago we did the last show. I said, "How cold is it?" You said you had to get the brass monkey out. I remember that.
Yeah, you didn't want to be on the front porch anymore. I don't know why.
Got it. Well, we're going to cover a little bit of ground today. We're going to talk about leadership issues and a couple other things. Before we get into the meat and the leadership, we have one important thing to discuss, and we got the right guy here. Dr. Denis Onieal, former Deputy U.S. Fire Administrator, former Superintendent of National Fire Academy, retired Chief of Department from Jersey City. He's got, I don't know, what do you got, 80 or 90 years in the fire service by now, right? Oh, just about, something like that. And but a guy we can always depend on and rely on, and not just in the jobs he was in, but for his counsel and his wisdom and all that. So, Denis, welcome to the Backstep, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks, Ron. Thanks, everybody. It's just good to see everybody.
I think the last time that Dr. Onieal had joined us, we were doing the old radio show, and he and I did it from his office at the academy.
We did it on the phone. Yeah. It was a phone call, right?
Yeah.
You're right, Tommy. I'll never forget it. I dropped an F-bomb like I always did back then, and Dennis froze in his path, and he said, "Are you allowed to talk like that on the radio?" I said, "We're on the internet, pal. Relax. It's okay." But I've gotten away from that, Dennis. I'm behaving myself lately. I've been good. You know, Tommy, you won a lot of money from Lori, didn't you?
Yes, because she always bet how long it would take that first bomb.
Tommy won a lot of $20 bills with the F-bombs. So we try to professionalize a little more. We try to make it a family show when we can. Okay, so we just drop stuff. But I think it's prudent today specifically and this week. Of course, this show is on Monday night, St. Patty's Day. Tommy wore his green shirt in honor of. That's nice, Tom. And Dennis painted his rear wall green just for St. Patrick's Day, which I think was a nice thing to do.
I'm celebrating my newly discovered Irish heritage, thanks to the 23andMe people.
Huh. You found out you got Irish in you?
I get more than I thought.
Really?
Always knew there was a little bit, but it also explains some of my behavioral issues as a young man.
I think you better stop there, Tommy.
See, sometimes it just takes a lifetime to figure that stuff out. Right?
Well, just we all learned.
So we think.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
No.
We just learned.
You got it. You got it, bud.
That the Federal Emergency Management Agency sent an edict down to stop all the classes at the National Fire Academy on campus and off campus, and it's difficult to explain or to really identify the consequences of that. It's just a steady degradation of professional skills in the fire service. There were people on their way into Emmitsburg for the Executive Fire Officer program, for the Managing Officer program, for some of the very highly technical classes in fire investigation and hazardous materials and emergency medical services and fire prevention. And the men and women who are on their way into the campus now are going to have to be rescheduled over the next, it's going to take probably 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, to get them all rescheduled because their lives are complicated. They have families and they can't always come back when the NFA says you need to come back. But the only thing that's going to change this is for your listeners, the people watching this broadcast, to write to and call your federal senators. You have 2 in each state, and your congressional representative. My feeling is that what's going on right now is that they're more or less just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing which causes the most amount of static and which doesn't. And if the things don't cause a lot of static, they're going to go away. And we need to help everyone understand that we've got to raise a ruckus and get that stuff back on target. Now, years ago, when Ron and I were at the National Fire Academy, Ron was the director of the National Fire Academy Alumni Association. We pulled that trigger a couple of times and raised a ruckus and got classes back and expanded classes. And now it's time for everybody to do this. Now, the current superintendent, the current Deputy United States Fire Administrator cannot say what I'm saying. And it was only because of Ronnie and my deep friendship that goes back probably 40 years that I could pick up the phone and whisper in his ear and he'd turn around and do what needed to be done. And Tommy was right with him. But today, I don't know what kind of power we have, and it's important that we start raising a ruckus to get these classes back on campus.
Yeah, so I think based on that, it's a call for action. Everybody and anybody has all kinds of causes. Any day of the week in Manhattan, there's 100 protests going on about something. We had an owl die. It hit a building. It flew into the building and died. They had a memorial service. There's now a statue of that owl somewhere in Manhattan. They made a movie about him. I mean, but everybody's got a cause. That's my thing. This is our cause. And I know that there's a couple of 100,000 guys that have been through the academy since 1979. Okay, so this is a call to action. If you believe in the organization and you believe in the institution that took so many years to build and make it what it is today. When people ask me about the NFA, I tell them that's our West Point. That's the West Point of the fire service. And I said, and I'm not sure if there was thoughts about shutting down the FBI Academy in Quantico. I don't think that's on the table. Frankly, I don't think it is. Right. So this is our Quantico. This is ours. So for you men and women who are out there who love going to the academy, and I see all your postings on LinkedIn. I just got back and I met great people, and you're using those tools that they teach you that you bring home to use to make your department better. Get on the horn. Email them. When we did it back in the day, there was I forgot what year it was, but Tom Ridge was the Homeland Security Secretary, and it was in his era, right after 9/11, a couple of year or two after 9/11, and they were going to cancel 40 some odd classes. And I found out a little bird called me up and had a 301 area code, and he said they're canceling classes, and he hung up. I said okay. Got to the Alumni Association. We flooded Washington to the point where that a month or three later, after that kind of was happening, Tom Ridge was our guest speaker at the Congressional Fire Services dinner. And he came out on the stage and they introduced him and we gave him a standing O. And the first thing he said, he leaned into the mic and said, "You guys from the Fire Academy, you got your classes back. Stop writing, stop calling." And then I remember Dennis caught my eye from across the room. We were sitting 15 tables apart and we kind of nodded at each other. And so that's what you have to, it's got to be a grassroots effort. You got to get in there and start swinging away. That's how it happens.
I need to mention to those of us who I tend to be a little apolitical sometimes and wouldn't know who to write to voice my concerns about this. If you go up on the Congressional Fire Service Institute's webpage, all of that information is available to you of who you need to express your concerns to about these actions. And I got to echo the statements of those two. We're going to talk about leadership issues here this evening with Dr. Onieal, and I'm a product of the environment. I started going to the academy in 1982, I think it was. I took my first class there and graduated the executive fire officer program. And that's where I learned about leadership. And we'll talk about some of that here as the show progresses.
Wow, you went in 82. You're an old guy. Wow. So let's kind of dive in and hopefully, again, the men and women watching this broadcast will take it to heart and get some action, get it going. And Tommy had a great idea where to get that information from. So Denny, I want to kind of start tonight with when you came into the fire service, when you were a probationary firefighter, when you were a young lieutenant, what was leadership like back then? What how were you spoken to? How were you treated? Did it work back then? Was it the right way to go? And then we'll talk about maybe why doesn't it work now, kind of thing. So I want to turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, first of all, you don't know any better. You don't know whether the leadership style that you were exposed to in those days, that was the only thing you knew. So that was all you knew. So you didn't know whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. You presumed that it was good. But they were all World War II veterans. They all came back. We had several of them that were officers. I think I had all our officers in the fire department. Perhaps 3 or 4 of them were officers in the military. The rest were all enlisted. And that was, the strong, silent type. If you were a lieutenant and you had a problem and you went to your battalion chief or your captain, their response to you was, "Why are you bringing this to me? You're the lieutenant, you deal with it. And, if you need any help or something like that, come back." I think by and large, it worked not because it was good or effective, because it was the only thing we knew. And we started to get exposed to different ways of thinking. We were very, very close to New York City, 3,000 feet away. So our professors in school, there were a bunch of us who were veterans who were going back to school on the GI Bill. And we were exposed to university theories on management. We were exposed to officers from the New York City Fire Department in terms of their leadership and management in the fire department. And that started to bring things around. Now, there was an old saying at the time, it's probably still valid, that, we make progress one retirement at a time. So as, the old guard started to leave and then the Korean War veterans started to come in, you can almost feel the change in management style. And then when the Vietnam veterans came in, again, it was just that change in management style.
So let me ask you. So do you think it worked like that back then because of the heavy military presence and background? You had World War II and Korean guys leading Vietnam veteran guys like yourself. I know you're a Vietnam vet. So it was basically the guys understood the military way. So going into the fire academy or being a young firefighter, it kind of fit because you already knew that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and again, it's one of these things, you don't know any different. I don't want to say you don't know any better. You just don't know any different.
Right.
That's just the way you're brought up.
I have very fond memories of, I started out in Jersey in 76. And 1980, I made the move to New Mexico and really had to start paying more attention to the wildland portion of the business. And I can think of when I first discovered that the Forest Service folks had a way to turn down an order. So if you got assigned to do something, and maybe your crew didn't know how to do it, there was a proper procedure to be followed to turn the order down. I thought back to being in Millburn and Battalion Chief Jack Ross, God rest his soul. If he gave you an order and said you had the gumption to say, "Chief, I don't think this crew is going to be able to do that," they'd still be pulling pieces of his boot out of my ass. Get that done. Yeah. That was definitely a change in leadership style that I was basically brought up in. And they were effective, but I think that things are much different now.
Well, getting away from the military thing. It's and that's what happened. When I come in the mid 70s into the 80s, the Vietnam guys were certainly around then in the 70s, and then through the 80s and 90s and 00s, they kind of retired or even on the volunteer side kind of faded away. So you didn't have the military presence anymore at all.
Mhm.
And frankly, I think that hurt us. I think that hurt us because the young people coming into the service after that military era had no concept of that paramilitary organization that the fire service is, and about, when you go into school and you get, and the DI is in your face and all of that stuff, and being told what to do. We have a 10% dropout rate at the fire academy in New York City. And we put a class of 350 on, 35 to 40 of them within the first 3 weeks. And they come to us. We very rarely fail anybody. They come to us and say, this isn't for me. Because these are now the kids of today. They're 21, 24, 25. Maybe they had a job on Wall Street or in an office or driving a truck or whatever they were doing. And now they're at Paris Island. They're in Paris.
Is that why they're leaving, Ron? Is that what they're saying, that it's too strict?
A percentage of them is like, I didn't sign up for this. And a lot of them come to the realization that this is a lot harder than it looks. This looks easy on television kind of thing. So, but there's a percentage of the people who leave, like, I didn't sign up for this. I don't want these guys in my face, and I'm not listening. And so, but they do it on their own. Like, you don't have to take a guy and say, go out the door, So, I think, so I guess, so let me ask you then, the leadership styles today, which is a lot different from when we all started, the three of us started 100 years ago. Would it have worked back then? Do you think it would have worked, the stuff we're doing today?
Well, I saw glimpses of that in my earlier days. We had several chief officers who were, I would say, would probably fit in as a chief officer today. And some of the things that they were very good at were communications issues. They listened. They didn't shut you down. And when I say listen, there's a difference between hearing and listening. They listened to understand. They listened to, and that helped quite a bit. The other thing was there were fewer technical things to know about firefighting in those days. We didn't have the science behind what we have today on, certain different things. So their realm of knowledge, or their scope of knowledge, was much less than it is today. There was much less fewer things to consider. I mean, it would, they'd focus a lot on hydraulics and, different kinds of hose lays and how you use ladders and the basic stuff, things that you would get today in firefighter 1, 2, and firefighter 1 and 2. So in that sense, it was different then. The orders were simpler, the focus was simpler, the objectives were simpler.
Interesting. I sometimes I try to picture, that old crusty officer or instructor from back then, now, and what we do now. And again, they come to our academy. They're going to boot camp, and that's how we describe it. Anybody who thinks about going, they say, well, what's it like at training in New York City? It's boot camp, and it is like that in most places, and there's protocols, and we have drill instructors and we have fire instructors. We have both and all that stuff. So if that's not for you, then you don't belong here. But I try to picture it both ways. But when going back to that thought I had about the military, and now, of course, unfortunately, we were just at war for 20 years again. So now we're getting an influx of military people again. I think that in of itself lent itself to a stronger and more disciplined group. Not that the kids today are undisciplined, but they never got that. Mm-hmm. They never got that. I wasn't in the service. And this is going to sound funny, but I spent my entire youth from 8 to 22 in the Boy Scouts. Okay, it's not the military, although we wore uniforms and carried knives. I'm just saying, right? So, but there was some form of lining up. We're going to march. We're going to line up. We're going to do this. We're going to have a ceremony. We're going to be quiet. All of those little things. And then the most important thing, Denny, I got from scouting is I learned how to cook.
Yeah. Well, I want to separate out the military experience. Now, everybody has a picture in their mind of what basic training is like from the movies. And I would respectfully suggest that basic training in the movies is like firefighting in the movies, or police department work in the movies.
Right.
They have to make a story. Right. So I mean, yeah, our DIs yelled at us and that kind of stuff, and we had to march a lot and run a lot, but they were really interested in your progress. And I would hope that the progressive fire departments today would understand the same thing. I mean, I suspect that there are among us a group of people that want to play our Lee Army, the Marine Corps DI story, but that's not the way you get people to learn.
I agree, and I've watched up here. I was at the Rock today, as a matter of fact. I was there this morning for about 3 hours, and I watch even the DIs, and while they're doing their thing, they're keeping an eye on these kids. They're making sure that they're okay, and all of that stuff. And then when they trip and fall, and they bring them in the office, they tell them, we want you to be successful. We want you to be a firefighter. We want to help you get to the end. So I've seen it and I've heard it. And so that's the good news. That really is the good news. Tom,
I think we're going to see a return, especially with the vets where they are within the organizations right now. And one of the concepts that I really kind of enjoyed learning about was leaders' intent, and how basically good communication, laying out of expectations, letting the folks know what the leader's vision is of what this thing's going to look like when the operation is done. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a shift back to some of that in the way of, and I know we're going to talk about values and culture, but I think that type of thing lends itself to that concept, if you would. I don't know whether either one of you guys were familiar with Edgar Schein's organizational culture and leadership text, but he had a quote in there that has stuck with me through the years, that leadership is the management of culture. And the culture of the fire service, we know, is pretty varied geographically, age-wise. A number of things come into play there. But going back and looking at our culture and where we came from can also assist in doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, interesting that you talk about that. You talked about the leader's intent in some of the books I've read on leadership. I think it was Mattis's book, Call Sign Chaos, and a couple other military guys. They talked about the commander's intent. Yeah. And I hadn't heard about that until I read these books within the last couple of years. And I'm hearing those sayings now in the fire department. What's the commander's intent? And so I think you're onto something, Thomas.
Let me add to that a little bit and put it into a firehouse environment, or put it in a battalion or a division. And that is that the officers that are in charge of those organizations, if you're a lieutenant or a captain in charge of a company, or a battalion chief in charge of a battalion, you need to worry about your company. You need to worry about your battalion. You need to worry about your division. Don't worry about the department. Don't worry about the other shift. Don't worry about what the chief should be doing, or the mayor. I mean, we all know. I mean, I work for the largest law firm in the state of New Jersey, the Jersey City Fire Department. Place full of lawyers, and they were all management experts, and I know that all knew how to be the chief. But if you really want to be a successful leader in the fire department today, I would recommend that you just focus on your little patch of ground. The men and women that you work with, make them better. Make them better than you if you can. But the other shift and all this other stuff that people worry about is just, it's rhetoric. It's a waste of time, and it accomplishes nothing.
It's super interesting you said that. I'll tell you why. I was sitting in one of your classrooms at the National Fire Academy probably 20 years ago. And I called it your classroom because you were the owner at the time. But it was of course, I don't remember which one, but I was sitting next to a young truck captain from Charlotte. Pretty sure it was Charlotte. No, is that North Carolina?
North Carolina. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice kid. I remember his first name. I don't remember his last name. And we're going through some of this stuff, and we're getting to a little bit of leadership. And I don't remember the course it was. It might have been a command and control course or something. And he said to me he leaned over like we were just taking a break, and he said, Ron, he said, and he had that little Southern drawl. He was adorable, this guy. He said, how am I going to go back and change my whole department? And I said, you can't.
Nope.
He said, how many guys are on the truck with you? He said, my driver and 2 in the back. There's 4 of us. I said, that's what you got to do right there. Those, you 4. I says, you make your crew, your 4-man truck crew, the best damn truck in Charlotte. I said, and as you start to drill more and discuss more and come up with things, it's going to catch on. They're going to say, wait, how the hell did these guys get a portable ladder up? Like they're off the rig, and in like 3.5 seconds, there's a 24-foot extension ladder up to the roof of the taxpayer. I said, they're going to look at that and say, what the hell are you guys doing? How did you do that? I said, and because you're not going to do it by, I said, we talk about the fire service. We call it, we can't do things by revolution. It's evolution, right? Mm-hmm. It takes time. I said, but when they see you, you kind of be setting the example without saying a word, and things are coming back from the bosses saying, yeah, 10 truck got in there. They had the building laddered in 5 minutes. They were up. They were on the roof. I said, you got to start with 4 of you. And it's the same thoughts that I had, again, back then. And the fact that you're saying it now, that confirms my whole entire career. You just confirmed my 50 years in the fire service. I'm good.
Well, I would add only one thing, and it's kind of adding on to what you said. If you're a good leader, you don't have to say anything.
There you go.
Use words only if you have to.
If you have to. So it's funny you say that.
Go ahead.
Last week we were invited. If you haven't, Tommy and I have a book club, by the way. Then at the end we talk about books that we recommend people read.
Do they have pictures in them?
They all come with crayons. So yes. Tommy's library burned up a few months ago. Both books. The whole library's gone, and they weren't even colored in yet. It was terrible, So I bought this book and read it in 3 nights about a year or 2 ago. So last week,
guys, Jocko and I think the other guy.
Yeah, it's Leaf Babin. Yeah. Well, last week, Jocko Willink was at the police academy in Queens, and we got invited. They got a huge auditorium there. They had it's probably seats a couple of hundred, so we had about 25 seats. So I got to go. And I'll tell you a side story about that. But he kind of alluded to the same thing. What he said was, he said, the best SEAL team leaders, he says, and I try to make myself like them. When we get into the city, he was in Ramadi, this guy. They got the shit knocked out of him there. But he said, when we get to we're going to take a house, he said, it was all hand signals. I didn't have to say a word. I went like this. And that's everybody knew their job. Everybody knew what to do, how to do it. Same thing on the fire ground. Truck gets, they know they got to ladder the building, vent, whatever they have to do. So yeah, if you say you should be able to say very little and get the job done, right? Mm-hmm. So the side story to the book is I bring it with me, but I leave it in the car. And I said, no, on purpose. And I said, I'm not going to nerd out and stand there and walk up. Jocko, will you sign my book, please? I walk in the auditorium. There's 400 cops online with the book like this, waiting for a signature. I went back to the car, got the book. He signed the book. All right, so that was that. Yeah. I'm just saying, shit happens, right? Yeah. So you started to allude to like the advice what you would tell a new lieutenant or a captain how to improve their leadership skills. So what's really the deep, prudent advice? What do you tell? You're invited to an academy somewhere. Brand new group of lieutenants in the room. They just got promoted. What's your advice on how they can improve their leadership skills? What do you tell them?
Well, probably the first thing, and you both of you know this already, is to sit down and listen. And the most important skill that you have is those 2 ears. And make sure that you understand, what the culture is that you're walking into before you start making decisions. And the second step in that process would be to ask questions. And I say it in a certain way. The most flattering thing that you can ever say to anyone is, I need your advice. Can you help me? How do you think we can do this? Okay. And bring people along and listen to what they have to say, and don't interrupt them. Don't, come back with some retort that is going to knock it down. And if I can suggest one thing that I've seen a lot now is put this away. Put this phone away. Don't even have it on your desk. Stick it in a drawer, because you're going to be, I have seen lately, even public speakers are wearing Apple Watches. And when it buzzes off on a message or a text or something, they're stopping their lecture and looking at the watch.
Oh, God.
And it's just destroys communication, because I mean, there's only two exceptions. If one of your parents is in surgery or your wife is more than 8 months pregnant, okay, you should have the phone nearby. Other than that, you can put it away for 15 or 20 minutes and focus on what the men and women are telling you.
That's great advice, Denny. When I'm teaching, I still teach in New Jersey. I still teach for the Division of Fire Safety. When I do those classes, I take my phone off my belt and I put it in my briefcase. I don't even want to feel it vibrating, because it's a distraction, and it's almost automatic today. So I take it off, and when I'm on a break, I look at it and see if anybody's looking for me. But that's great advice. I agree. Good stuff.
And it shows that you're interested. And I've seen people say this, I'll turn it over on the desk. No. Out of sight, just completely out of sight. Yeah. And the other thing, as a new officer going in, and I'll just tell a quick story. When I made battalion chief, lieutenant and captain, you're in the same company all the time. But when I made battalion chief, I would go around and I would call up and have a meal at a different firehouse, lunch or dinner, whatever it was, every day. And they all knew that I didn't like liver. So I'd call them up and I'd say, what are you having for dinner? And if they wanted me to come, they'd say, oh, we're having hamburgers, we're having steak, we're having pasta. But if they didn't want me to come for some reason, they would say, oh, Chief, we're having liver. I said, okay, no problem. I'll come back another time. But here's the point. When I went for dinner or lunch, I would sit down and I never discussed the job. Your daughter's just went to college. How's she doing? I heard you just bought a new car. How do you like it? I heard your mom was sick. How's she doing? I knew something about everybody, and I wanted. It wasn't a technique. It wasn't a trick. It was sincere, but I wanted to know about them as a human being. Now, after action reports, or which we had whenever we had to work in fire, which was just about every day, more than one work of fire every day, we would get the battalion together, and then we would go through the entire event. And we started with the first due engine, second due engine, third due engine, fourth due engine, first due truck, second due truck, rescue. The battalion, but here was the rule. 1, you could not criticize anybody else. 2, if anybody said, we made a mistake, we did this wrong, nobody else could criticize them. And I was always the last to speak. So, and if I made a mistake, I would say, I should have done this, zigged instead of zagged, whatever it is I did. Why? First of all, it was a form of training, because we were repeating our evolutions over and over again, and everybody was hearing it over and over again, but they weren't hearing it from me. They were hearing it from each other, from their peers. Secondly, they understood that they could make an error or make a mistake, and the hammers of hell were not going to come down upon them. And then thirdly, and I would always try to, pick out something maybe I didn't do well or something. It showed that I was human too, that I could make a mistake. And, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. And, you know what I'm saying? It was just something that we did. But the firehouse visit was was a social event where I learned about, whether their kid in kindergarten can ride a two-wheeler bike yet,
Right.
or, their daughter who's studying nuclear physics in MIT. I knew something about all of them.
Yeah, and that goes a long way. It goes a long way. I they have those greeting card companies. They do fire cards and stuff with logos. I always had a pre-printed set of sympathy cards and get wells, and I'd hear stuff. Johnny's kid got hit by a car, or he fell off his bike and broke his arm. In the mail. At the time it was a 22-cent stamp, I think. But I did that.
Pony Express.
Yeah, right. I sent them a rock. I knocked it out on a rock. But I did it at Merck, and I did it at the Tribe, and I did it at Wilton. I did it when I had command of those places, and it never failed that sometime within the next couple of days, that guy would walk in my office. I said, "Chief, we got your car. Thanks a lot." I mean, that means a lot. And I had a guy at Mohegan. Him and his wife, they're about 45, and they're packing the minivan. They're driving down to Orlando with the 3 kids, and she picks up a suitcase, puts it on top. She says, "I don't feel good." Drops of a heart attack in the driveway. 45 years old. It freaked the whole department out. We didn't know what to do for this guy. But not only did I send that card, but I called him. He was out for about 2 weeks. I called him, and he came back, and he came in the office. He was emotional because of 2 things: because of his wife, and because we cared so much.
Sure.
I think Roosevelt said, "No one cares how much you know; they want to know how much you care," and that's true. That's absolutely true.
It was Maya Angelou.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought it was Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, it was one of the nice people. It's okay.
It was a nice person.
He was a nice person. Yeah, a smart person. I love hanging with smart people. They make me look stupid. But Tommy, you got something for the boss?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about values. And I got to tell you my values story. I'm a newly promoted fire chief. And I've got concerns about a 21-year-old firefighter and a 56-year-old battalion chief getting into a fist fight over what they're going to watch on TV that night. So I was concerned enough about it that we hired a consultant, and we used Jim Steffens, Dennis. I'm sure you remember Jim. To come in and do a values audit. And my eyes were opened to look at the results of that and realize that my concerns about the difference didn't exist. The same 55-year-old battalion and 21-year-old firefighter had the same core values. And I think the audit really opened that up for us. But those findings and using the results of the values audit in a strategic planning process, and we basically followed the outline of what Mark Wallace had put together in his strategic planning textbook, really kind of helped ease some of that and realize that the culture of the department hadn't really shifted that much over the years. And it was refreshing, and I was glad I didn't have to deal with the range wars between the younger generation and the old guard.
But it was the planning process that aligned everything up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way the mission statement and the core values and our ability to create expectations of what we communicated to the troops really took the edge off a lot of that stuff.
Sure it does. I mean, it's not gonna solve the problem between 2 knuckleheads, but it's it'll give you some firm footing on the direction to go when everybody's standing around looking, well, what are we going to do next? Right. But at the same time, that process of planning, or as President Eisenhower or General Eisenhower said, planning is everything, but once the battle starts, they're useless. But it's the process of thinking through and getting everybody aligned on a kind of a direction. Good job, Tommy.
There's some great examples out there that I've had the pleasure of. I was a Brunacini disciple for a long time, and thankfully had the opportunity to interact with him a couple of times. Ron and I had him on the show by accident one year at FDIC, and looking for those examples out there of good leadership. And the time I got to spend in Gettysburg, one of my favorite leadership studies is Joshua Chamberlain, the Battle at Little Round Top, and how he really epitomized the value of clear communication, empowering the troops to do what needed to be done, and then adapting to a plan B when plan A went to hell in a handbasket. Again, just another great example out there that's not particularly related to the fire service, but a lot of this stuff carries over from whether you're managing a large industrial company or a fire department.
Yeah. But keep in mind also that Joshua Chamberlain was one of the few that wrote books about the battle. So history is written by the winners. That fish kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But he was good. There's no question about that.
Yeah, very, very cool. Denny, when Tommy said we accidentally had Bruno on the show, we set up at FDIC, and they set up a studio for us. We have guests in or whatever. So Tommy and I getting ready. We're going on the air like in 5 minutes, and they hook us up with the mic or whatever, and the girl sits us down and getting ready. And Bruno walks in. He's got a little shopping bag, and he walked around the floor for a while. He said, "Hi guys, hey Chief, how you doing?" He says, "Yeah, good." He puts the bag down and sits down right between us. I look at Tommy, he looks at me. We never asked him to come on the show. So we don't say a word. And we're talking about, it so happens we were talking about stuff like customer service, which he was real big on, and about the public trust. We got into that for a while, public trust and this and that. And we did, I don't know what it was, Tommy. Were those half-hour slots I think we did with FDIC?
45 minutes. And it was great. Great conversation.
It was off the top. We had just a frank conversation. We get done. And as we're getting finished, Dennis Rubin walks in the room, and we figure he's next because he was next on the to record, right? So we got up, we got done, and Dennis, this guy yelled cut. We were off the air. Dennis said, "When'd you get here, Alan?" He says, "An hour ago." He says, "You're on my show." He goes, "Oh, okay," and he sat down and did another one. It wasn't like
Bruno. If I know Bruno, he was looking for the bathroom.
Yeah, probably. But he just sat down. We did it. And he goes, "Oh, no, I got here early. I sat with these guys. We had a good time. Let's do it again." Just kept going. It was hysterical. It was great.
Yeah, you got any coffee?
Yeah. Iced tea. He was an iced tea guy. So let's just talk about, one of the interesting things when I was in Connecticut. When I'm at a Chiefs meeting, a career Chiefs meeting, and one of the Chiefs says, he says, I just promoted 2 young lieutenants. He says, at a fire, they are dynamic. They're dynamo. He said, they put their cape and cowl on. They fly around a building. He says, they're great. In the firehouse, they absolutely suck. And then it was like wildfire, went right around the table. Every officer, every chief said, "You know what? Yeah, I got guys, they're great at emergencies, but in the firehouse." So I don't know if you guys know John Oates. He was the chief in East Hartford, and now he's doing work. He did some work for the Center for Excellence, and now he's doing something with behavior with firefighter, mental health and all that stuff. But John, smart dude, he said, "You know what?" He said, "I heard what you all said." He said, "I agree." He said, "We should run our own an academy class, so to speak, for new officers to teach them everything but firematics. Let's try to solve this problem." So we opened up 1 week a year in January when everything was quiet. We got the State Fire Academy up in Hartford by the airport. Not Hartford. What the hell's the airport up there? Anyway, it was by the Connecticut airport. I can't think of the name of the town. Windsor, West Windsor, Windsor Locks. And we got a nice room, and we told all the chiefs, send us your brand new officers within a year. the first year that they're in, whether some departments don't use lieutenants, everybody's a captain or whatever. We will put them through a 5 or 6 day course, and we did everything but firematics. It was all leadership and management stuff. And the chiefs, the career chiefs, they all took a piece of it. Okay, my leadership thing was safety and leadership, and one guy did fireground leadership, and one guy did behavioral stuff, and it was a great program. We ran it for 5 years that I was in Wilton, and then when I left, they continued to do it. I'm not sure if they're doing it anymore, but we taught them to deal with problems with the personnel stuff. Our good friend Chris Carter from Summit, who was the chief in Summit, and I know he teaches at the academy, and he teaches, I think, for Fairleigh Dickinson University. One of the smartest guys I've met around, and just a real good guy, gentleman. And when he was president of the New Jersey Career Chiefs, at one meeting, he walked in and he had this look of frustration on his face. And we started the meeting, and he says, I got to say something. He was a real low-key guy. You know him. He's very low-key. He said, being a fire chief would be a great job if it wasn't for the people. And we got cracked up, and we agreed with him.
Yeah.
90% of your work is personnel. It's personnel stuff, So with all that having been said, Dennis, what's your view on, how do we deal with the people, and how do we deal with the problem children of today? Not of today, but all along. What do you do with the? And there's a whole bunch of categories. You got the sniper, and you got the big mouth, you got the guy who clams up. But a problem child is a problem child. So, what's your advice for the young officer today?
Well, let's go back and take a look at how they're selected. They're selected because of their technical knowledge. They're selected because they know hydraulics, they know building construction, they know time, temperature, whatever it is that they're measuring for promotion. But they don't measure human skills. And it's probably one of the more difficult things to measure. And whether or not it's a reliable and valid method to promote people is another point. But all of us that's why you're a manager, because it's the people. It's not the technology. The fires you know how to deal with, the emergencies you know how to deal with. You've been trained. So your point of training people in the human skills is critical. And if you want to have a successful organization, that's where you need to spend your time. And if you're in an organization that doesn't spend the time training people how to work with others, how to develop your interpersonal skills, how to listen, communication skills, vision skills, all of those things, if your department doesn't do it, you're going to have to do it more or less on a one-on-one. And I had problem children, as a deputy chief, I had problem children battalion chiefs, that you just deal with it. So what I would do was I'd ask them to come over, and I would let them drive me around. And we talk in the front seat of the car, or the SUV we had. And I'd say about this, and it always gave them the opportunity to think about driving without thinking about what Onieal was saying. And it was private. They knew it was private. It was just two guys sitting in the front seat of a truck, talking, going around. And and you bring them along. But you don't want to create a clone of yourself. You want to understand that they have their perspective on things. But I had one person that I don't even want to tell you what rank he was, but he would blow up and he would make these radical decisions while he was angry. So I'll give you another rule. And the rule is, don't say or do anything that makes you feel good when you're pissed off. That's it. Don't do anything stupid. And he would do it all the time. They would bait him, and he would go off on the deep end. And it was almost like entertainment for the troops. Let's watch the chief go bonkers, So, temper, but you've got to bring these people along. You're not going to give them a 15-minute lecture in your office and change their life.
Right.
But the best way is for you to be the example, for you to show how, again, don't use words, use your behavior. Right. And I learned more from, to be truthful, I learned more from bad leaders than I did from good ones. But the good ones had certain personality traits and certain interpersonal skills that I tried to emulate. So no matter what you did, no matter how bad it was, never raised my blood pressure, never raised, my blood pressure was 5 and my pulse rate was 2. You just, and you force yourself. You say, I'm going into this thing. I know I'm going to get angry. Don't get angry. Don't let it get you.
And that's a hard skill. That's a hard skill to manage, because most of us in the service, we're all type A's. We're aggressive and all of that. And it took me a while, like it took you, to learn from different guys in different situations, to say, all right, really what I want to do is dive over the desk and choke the life out of this little bastard, but I'm not gonna. Right. And that's setting that example. And it comes, we've been talking about that forever. And I try to do that with everything, whether it was driving my Chiefs car, my uniform, it was always clean and pressed and all of that, because even today, I walked in somebody's office 2 weeks ago on the 5th floor in headquarters, and there's a woman there. I won't tell you who she works for or where. And she said, Chief, you always look crispy. She said to me, your uniforms. She goes, you got to see what the guys look like when they walk in this office sometimes, So, but to me, especially when I was the chief of my little fire departments that I worked at, it said that's part of setting the example. That was saying a word.
That's just as important as anything else.
Without saying a word. Yeah, looking the part and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, downtown Brooklyn is a very famous restaurant, famous for their cheesecake since 1930, Junior's Restaurant. Okay, so I'm having lunch there a month or 3 ago. In fact, what's his name? Kevin Roche was in town from Arizona. With a guy with Ray O'Brockie. I don't know if you know Ray
from Baltimore City.
Yeah, Baltimore. So Ray's now working for the American Wood Council, by the way, and he's the fire service rep that's kind of going around the fire department saying, mass timber construction, it's not that bad, and here's why, which is fine. We're getting into that in the city a little bit. So so the three of us went to eat at Junior's, and I went up. The bathrooms are upstairs. My age, everything's upstairs now, unfortunately. So climb up the stairs. And I go, and there's a guy there, I guess about my age, when I walk in, and he said, he says, I'm having lunch with my son downstairs. He says, and you walked by our table, and he said, Dad, that's what a fire chief's supposed to look like. And I said, I'll take that as a very high compliment. Thank you very much. But everything you said, I think is spot on. It has a lot of merit, and it's about setting that example and not raising your voice. If I raised my voice 3 times in 40 years, it was a lot, and it was warranted. And in one of the leadership books I read, I can't think of which one, but one of them says, use your anger judiciously. So if you're that
good tool,
if you're that calm guy, and you're always, the way you operate, I know how you operate in Jersey City. Okay, the radio tape of the hazmat job on July 4th is famous. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Okay? So calm in the face of adversity, all that. If you're that guy and you raise your voice on rare occasion, you got everybody's attention. Because holy cow, he got angry or he got loud, or that it's had to be really bad, So use your anger judiciously. I thought that was good advice as well. I thought that was pretty cool. So,
I had go ahead, Tommy. Go ahead.
One of the things, I had the honor in Farmington of coming up through the ranks, and had a pretty good grip on stuff. But when I retired there and went up to Colorado, coming into an organization that I didn't know much about, and trying to identify what the culture of the department was. I got to give kudos to Dan Madrikowski, one of the smartest guys I've ever met, had turned me on to a study that the Smithsonian did back in 1985. And they called it a case study in occupational folk life, but it delved into the Washington, D.C. Fire Department and the culture of the department. And it's a fascinating read because it talks a little bit about some of the technical side about it, but it talks about narratives, storytelling. It talks about joking relationships, because we know nobody ever tells jokes in the firehouse. It talks about nicknames. It talks about customary behaviors for station life and activities, and sharing that and trying to have people say, part of that's us. And this is what we're doing here. And then trying to tie all that stuff back into it of values and expectations and trying to create an awareness of that, I think will help young officers as they're coming up and use those cultural stories to help explain where we've been and where we're heading to.
You know, and well, I went through it also because I went to 3 or 4 different places and I had to learn the culture, and it takes time. It doesn't happen in a half hour, that's for sure. You know, but I was lucky in where I went to, all the places I went to. I had good people, and I always had a good number too, which was really important. You know, one of the things we talk about culture. A couple of years back, I was talking to Tony Castros from California. Yeah, from Metro. And we were talking about this in certain terms. And he goes, you know what we did? He says, we made up a booklet called The Metro Way. And we put a little cartoon figure, a fireman with a helmet, but it was cartoon.
Yeah.
And we did this little booklet called The Metro Way. Like, this is us. This is our culture. It was a book on their culture. And it was a pamphlet. And inside it said, we don't steal. We don't lie. It was like their 10 commandments practically.
Yeah.
And you know, we are honest. We do this. And he said they would hand that booklet out at recruitment drives. So a kid walks over, he's 20 years old, and says, I want to be a fireman in Metro. Okay, here's an application, and this is us. Read this. If this isn't you, don't fill out the application. And it worked for a long time. And when a guy did come in and forgot, they put that book right in his face and say, wait a minute, you forgot about this. That was their way. I thought that was a great idea. You know, because we go through all of these things today where every single person that comes into every single fire department wants the department to change for them. You know, and somebody said recently, you know, we're not joining them. They're joining us. You know, these are our rules, you know, and if you don't like these rules, don't come. You know, it's okay. Go stock shelves at Walmart. They need people. Amazon needs drivers. We know that. So, but we're not joining you. You're joining us, you know? And, you know, as time goes on, I think that it somewhere it's going to balance out. Right now, the pendulum swung the other way. We're changing everything for everybody who walks in a firehouse, no matter who they are, where they're from. You know, whether it's building eight separate bathrooms and eating 15 different kinds of foods and everything, it's got to level out somewhere. I'm not sure when or how that's going to happen. I'm not sure we'll see it, but
what you're describing, Ron, is an absence of leadership, and that's what happens in any organization when there's no strong leadership. There's no effective leadership. You know, the old saying, the inmates run the asylum. So, you know, the chief officers need to lead. They need to imbue their subordinate officers with the responsibility and the skill set to lead. This is, and if they need help doing that, either do it inside or do it outside. Get them some help to develop their skills. But that the most important person is that company officer. That company officer determines that department, you know, one at a time. You know, the old story about the corporals running the army. They do.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Generals don't, you know, they're not around all the time.
Right.
You got to rely on the corporals and the sergeants to get.
You know, it's about I don't know when. I'm going to say 15 or 20 years ago. Boy, am I getting old. But Bobby Hoff, who was the recent fire commissioner in Chicago, is now He's now a chief of a small department in the suburbs. And we suck at retirement. I get that. We all suck at retirement. We're not good at it. So
I say we're flunking retirement. That's what
right. I flunked retirement. Right. So when he did a keynote at FDIC, I'm going to say late 90s, early 00s. I think he was a captain. And he delivered a phenomenal message in keynote. But the message was the officer in the right front seat runs the fire service.
Yeah.
And I'm in the back room. I'm in the green room. Who am I sitting with in the green room? Brunacini, Tommy Brennan. God bless their souls, right? Mm-hmm. Tommy Brennan, a couple of muckaties, and we're just sitting there watching it on the TV in the green room. And they all said, "Did you hear what that guy just said?" So he comes back and in a very loving, kiddingly way, what are you out of your mind? The officers, the chiefs run the job. And I forgot who said it in the back room. It was precious. Do you know the fifth horn is the heaviest one to carry? And all that kind of, it was great. And I jumped in and I gave him a little bit, all in good brotherhood. I said, nah, you're wrong. We have the pressure. And I'm flying home from Indy that week, the end of the week. It's like Saturday. And I said, I think he was right. I mean, I thought about it. I said, I think so. So I called him on Monday. I gave him a hard time Monday. And he was in. Captain Hoff. And I hung up on him like 4 times. Captain Hoff hung up. Who is this? I said, it's Kanterman. Why are you hanging up on me? I says, because you're right. And I called him to tell him he was right.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, as a fire chief throughout wherever I went, I used that and I meant it. When I showed up in Wilton, they had the boxing gloves on, the union. They wanted to pick the next chief, and the town told them no. They were out for me. Not me, Ron Kanterman, but whoever was going to get the seat, they were going to just box. So we started to box a little bit. We sparred, and we had I had my first officers meeting, and I told them that. I said, "You guys, you drive this department. I don't drive the department. You guys, what you do, the decisions you make in the first couple of seconds when you pull up to that house or whatever it is." The decisions you make is gonna set the pace. You guys run this job. This is your job, and I stuck with that my whole career because I believe it.
It's not only at the fires, Ron. 95% of what goes on in the fire department has nothing to do with fires.
Right.
It's about training. It's about inspections, and it's living in the firehouse.
Right.
And that's where they need to be leading.
Right.
The fires. Eventually they'll go out.
Right.
We can say that on this broadcast.
Right.
You look out in the city, you don't see smoke in the sky. Maybe the kids in the high schools can't balance a checkbook. Maybe the neighborhood isn't safe, but you don't see any smoke in the sky. So,
pretty much.
Yeah. But I do a lot of lecturing.
Just for the record, Dennis, they saw plenty of smoke in the Bronx this morning. We had a 5th alarm in the Bronx. Just I don't want to prove you wrong or anything, but we had a 5th in the Bronx this morning. So just saying.
I've had the opportunity to speak with chiefs all over the country, and it's always such an honor to learn from them and the examples they present. But a lot of times I'm just hearing about problems. Mm-hmm. And I think back to it was my first EFO class. They gave us a required reading list. And on that list was Iacocca's autobiography. And there's a quote that I've kept out of one of those that he said, "We're continuously faced by great opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as insolvable problems."
Yeah.
And I think trying to develop the attitude that, it might be a problem right now, but it's going to work itself into something if you were able to solve it.
If you try.
Yeah.
If you sit around and complain about it and, point fingers at it and don't do anything about it, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. I had another saying that I used to use. I still use it. A horrible end is better than horror without end. You got a problem? Deal with it. You got a knucklehead? Deal with it. Right. Whatever it is.
Right.
It served me well. Yeah, I go around the country. I do a lot of lectures on leadership. I was in California. I was in Illinois, Ohio, Virginia Beach, Worcester, Mass, all over the place. And the company officers are the ones that I'm really interested in talking to.
Right. That's the
To
target.
help them improve.
I agree.
And they'll get there. They'll get there. They didn't think we were going to make it either, you know?
So as our time is winding down, Denny, what I'd love for you to kind of sum up your leadership credo, so to speak. Then what to do? Tom, you got any books? I got 2.
Go ahead and do them. I didn't grab anything off the
I
shelf.
want to wrap up with Dennis's final thoughts. We'll do a quick book, and then Tom, you have a role for today?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Denny, give us your last thoughts on this stuff.
You know, I would encourage people to embrace or love the job that we love, with the attitude of that we can solve these problems. The key to understanding, to being a successful officer, is understanding the human piece of this thing, that you're going to be dealing with human beings, and the technology stuff that we love, the strategy and the tactics, the hydraulics, the building construction. That's the simple stuff. That's the easy stuff. It's always the people stuff, the complex stuff. And communicate, listen, talk to people, learn about the people, what kind of lives they have. And not that you're going to delve into their personal issues, but, you know, you understand them as a human being, and generate trust. Without trust, it doesn't work.
Absolutely. Great words of wisdom. Thanks, Den. Real quick, I'm just going to push this one up. I showed it already. If you guys haven't seen this, Extreme Ownership. It's about owning your department, by 2 Navy SEALs. Really well written. What the way they wrote the book is the beginning of each chapter was a mission they were on, a war mission, and then what the leadership looked like in that mission, and then they translate it down to anybody can use this, and here's how. They did a really nice job with that. This has nothing to do with the fire service, but this was one of the most fascinating pieces of literature I've ever read. It's called Men and Things I Saw in the Civil War Days. This is actually in the National Archives as an official accounting of what happened in the Civil War. It's written by James Rusling, Ruslang. He was a brigadier general. And the first half of the book, he gives a chapter to the generals. So he writes about, hang on a second, you got to hear this. If you guys haven't seen this, and Denny, you live in Gettysburg. So if you haven't seen this book, you need to get it. Okay, so he gives a chapter to Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, George McClellan, Ambrose Burnside, Joseph Hooker, George Meade, George Thomas, William Tecumseh Sherman, Philip Sheridan, Ulysses Grant, Robert E. Lee, and then he does a couple other things. And then the second half of the book are the letters that he wrote home about the war. And it's fascinating. I'm telling you, this is right out of the archives. It says this work has been selected by scholars being culturally important and part of the knowledge of the base of civilization as we know it. It's in the public domain of the United States of America and possibly other nations. So it's called Men and Things I Saw in Civil War Days. Phenomenal, fantastic. Just you read through this and you just say, wow, at the end. It was just great. So that's Ron's pick of the month. With that, Tommy, you want to call the roll for today, please?
Yeah, the last time we were on the air was February 13th. And since that day, we've suffered 8 line of duty deaths. Back on February 13th, Steve Weekle from Covington, Virginia, perished from a heart attack after a call. On February 17th, Jeffrey Larson from War, West Virginia, passed away from an unknown medical at the scene. March 3rd, Terry Dykes from Etta, Mississippi, fell from an apparatus, suffered head trauma, and passed away. Also on March 3rd, Michael Winsey from New Orleans suffered an unknown medical at headquarters. Michael was the acting chief for New Orleans Fire. On March 5th, Christopher Rothmeyer from New London, North Carolina, passed away from injuries suffered in a vehicle collision. On March 8th, Vernon Collette from Warrensburg, Missouri, had a heart attack at a fire scene. March 9th, Don Kraler from Ridgeville, Indiana, from an unknown medical at the fire station. And on March 10th, Donald Kamerich from Pilot Grove, Missouri, had a heart attack after a call. As always, we ask that we keep the families of the fallen in your prayers and heed the lessons that they've left for us. With that, Mr. Kanterman and Dr. Onieal, great time. Good seeing you guys.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Can
Dennis,
we tell everybody we're from New Jersey, the three of us?
no, I don't want to tell them. Don't tell them we're from New Jersey. So
I used your New Jersey American line not too long ago, so
a Jersey American, is that
yes,
the
that's it. We're everywhere.
yeah, I'm telling you. I remember there was a comic that when they were searching for bin Laden, when the SEALs were looking for him, there was a comic. He says, "Why don't they send two guys from Jersey? They'll get him." They walk into the cave. Yo, Bin.
And they'll never find bin Laden's body.
Yeah, you know how far you live from New Jersey? What it took to get here? Tony hit him with the bat. That was it. This guy was hysterical. He's great. But Dennis, thank you so much. Our guest, Dr. Denis Onieal, Fire Chief, all-around fire guy. I call him the All-American Fire Guy. We appreciate you and everything you've done for the fire service in your long, illustrious career at the Fire Administration in Jersey City, and what you're even doing now in semi-retirement. We'll call it semi-retirement. So thank you for being on the show with us and jumping on the Backstep. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, of course, always to speak with these two gentlemen. So until we're up on the Backstep again, be safe, slow down, use your head, stop for red, eat light, use your head, watch how you drive, arrive alive, and hug your family when you say goodnight. So don't forget to do that. It's important. With that, we're going to sign off, and everybody take care. Be safe.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today.
Fire Facilities manufactures steel live fire training towers, customized to meet your training needs. Check us out at FDIC or learn more at firefacilities.